Hi there, you're listening to the Practical Stoic Podcast with your host, me, Simon Drew. If you'd like to listen to over 200 episodes that were recorded before 2020, then you can head to my Patreon site. It's patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. We'd love to have you there, and any support is greatly appreciated. We'd love to also have you on our Facebook community, the Practical Stoic Mastermind. But for now, enjoy the show. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. Now, I'm excited for today's conversation. I've got an interview that I did with somebody I've known for quite some time now, Ashley McCole. Now, Ashley is a practicing Stoic from Perth, Australia, my home country. And I really wanted to get him on today because we've been talking about getting him more involved within the Practical Stoic community on Facebook. So, as many of you will know, we have the Practical Stoic Mastermind on Facebook, which is a great group where many people are posting and asking questions and sharing their information and their knowledge of Stoicism. And I wanted Ashley to come on in and get involved in doing challenges within the community. So basically trying to get you guys into the state where you're not only learning from the podcast, but you're also doing challenges often to implement and embody the principles that you're learning in the podcast and through Stoicism and your own study into your life, so that it's not simply about learning the philosophy, it's about getting extremely practical and challenging yourself to be better than what you are today and yesterday. So I think that that's really important to get that practical element there. And Ashley is super helpful, super knowledgeable when it comes to Stoicism and philosophy. And he's going to be doing some really awesome challenges coming up in the Practical Stoic Mastermind. So before the episode starts, make sure you jump on Facebook, get in that group. The links are in the show notes, so we'd love to see you there. And we'd love to see you challenging yourself to implement these strategies and these principles and ideas of Stoicism into your daily life. So without any further ado, I want to present to you my friend Ashley McCole. Okay, so we're here with Ashley McCole now. Ash, I'm going to give everybody a bit of a backstory. So you've obviously been listening to the podcast for a while. You've probably been interested in Stoicism for far longer than I even have. But you were one of my first clients when I started doing coaching, and man, I have really enjoyed getting to know you. And one of the reasons why I've loved getting to know you is because you go so deep into your study and your learning, and you really do focus on the embodiment of the things that you're learning in Stoicism. And it inspires me as well, really inspires me to, as Marcus Aurelius has said, from somebody he was taught by, you don't want to just get the gist of the philosophy. You want to get the whole idea. You want to understand it and embody it. Yeah. And so the reason why we're talking today is because when I was thinking about starting kind of challenges within the Facebook group, as you know, I came to you and I said, hey man, you're running like meetup groups in Perth. You're absolutely an advocate for Stoicism. You're working hard on understanding it and embodying it. So I want you to run these challenges. And so everybody knows off the top of the bat, we are going to be, you, Ashley, are going to be basically running group challenges within the Practical Stoic Mastermind on Facebook so that people can start embodying this philosophy. So with that whole spiel in mind, Ashley, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you're doing with your groups over in Perth, and tell us about how you got Stoicism too.
Great. Awesome. Well, before we get into that, let's just take a moment to all our listeners. Let's just say, well done for being here. That's really awesome that you've taken the time out to be involved in the Practical Stoic Mastermind, either if you're on the Facebook or just by listening to this podcast right now, because there's a whole multitude of things that you could be doing right now. You could be watching the football, you could be doing a Netflix and chill, but you've made a choice to say, I actually think that listening to a podcast about practical Stoicism is more important than the endless, infinite opportunities out there right now. So So well done. And
Yeah, just listening to a couple of Aussie codgers here, just having a conversation. I still don't know why people listen to me. I don't get it, but you're right, right? It's so
yeah.
important to be choosing activities that are worthy of such an important like people need to understand, and the people who are listening to this podcast get it, right? Your mind is
Mm,
so important, your life is so important, like the
mm,
things that you do, the time that you spend is so incredibly important, and really the time you spend and the activities you choose to spend that time on will determine how your
mm,
life is lived. And man, like when you realize memento mori, when you realize how short your life could be
yeah.
and how little time you actually have here, oh man, there's so much stuff that you
Well,
want to get done, right?
that's interesting because Aristotle, if I understand this right, he believed that leisure was the most important thing to shaping our character, right?
Mm,
Because it's like you got to work and you got to sleep, and so that's going to be most of your day. And then if you've got a couple of hours a day for activities, like that's where you're going to get your growth. You know, that's where you're exploring and you're learning and you're hanging out with like-minded people. That's where what how you spend your leisure time is sort of that's what's shaping your character. You know, so
yeah.
sitting on the couch watching The Bachelor, like versus let's what if you did martial arts for 10 years, like what kind of
Yeah.
a shift is that going to make over all of those years?
Mm.
So yeah.
I got to
So
stop you
yeah.
there because that's a really important question, right? That question of what if, right?
Mm,
Man, if you can get into the habit of asking what if to like
mm,
every single habit that you have, what if instead of spending an hour every day watching, like you said, The Bachelor, and don't even get me started on some of the TV shows that are on these days. That's why
yeah.
we just threw out TV into the garage because we just don't want it. There's just nothing good on, right? but but you know, I think if you ask that question of what if I replaced this habit that I have with something that is far better, something that is far more worthy of how important I am and how important my life is,
Mm,
man, like you'll get some answers pretty much immediately that will show you like, yeah, of course,
mm,
why would I do anything else other than try to develop my mind, try to develop my character, which is what
yeah.
stoicism is all about, right? It's about the development of your mind and your character
Yeah.
because it is the most important thing
Yeah. I mean,
in your world.
every single choice that you make is a vote for who you want to be, because like
Mm,
there's that neural pathway in your brain that says we're going to sit on the couch and watch TV. And every time you sit on the couch and watch TV, it gets strengthened. Versus if you say, I'm going to get off the couch and I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to practice whatever it is, your brain is changing. Like in every moment, there's a new neural pathway that associates with let's get off the couch. And then
mm,
over time, that pathway starts to myelinate and it just becomes automatic. And, just like Epictetus says, your habits will, you'll be led where your habits take you.
mm.
And so, yeah, listening to a podcast about Stoicism is a pretty good way to spend your time,
You're
if you
speaking my
ask me.
language, man. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. But yeah, so for newcomers, like there's a lot of people that are kind of curious, checking things out, and great to have you. And for the lifelong learners, like we love that you're a part of our community.
Mm.
Because I think this sort of conversation is between more than just the two of us right now, because everyone who's listening is actively engaging in the process. They're ticking over all the things that we're saying,
Mm.
and so yeah, well, um, glad to have you in our
And
community of Stoicism.
that's the reason why I'm trying to focus more on getting people involved in the practice of stoicism
Mm,
outside of just listening to the podcast, right? And so I want to dive
mm,
deep into what you're going to be doing with your challenges. And people can always jump on the Patreon as well and come to the weekly Practical Stoic meetup group as well, which is awesome. And I'm going to be doing a lot more on there, but for this Facebook group, I really wanted to add something there because there's almost 4,000 people in there now. 4,000 Stoics from around the world trying to get better, trying to improve. And I thought we've got to do something in there where, you know, we can get people actively involved in, as you would say, embodying the philosophy, not simply
Yeah.
talking about it, not, you know, just jumping on Facebook and, you know, commenting on a post, but like, how can I use this today? So what
Yeah,
do
it's a
you envision
resource.
for the challenges going forward for people?
Uh, what do I envision? People doing them, I suppose. I mean,
I meant a few words. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, them being done. I mean, so this is our task as a group, is that we've got all the theory and all the information, but it like we can't just go hang out with Epictetus and say, all right, here's the deal. What am I doing wrong? You know, like I mean, I've found this, like we're kind of starting fresh, like working out how this whole thing works, how this whole Stoicism works. And we've got some huge advantages because science has definitely come a long way since then. And, you know, the distribution of information is amazing, almost to the point where it's a disadvantage because there's just so much out there that it's like the paradox of choice. But I mean, in my Stoic journey, there's things that it's taken me years to work out that I haven't been doing this right. You know, that's not really what they meant. And so I guess there's two parts to the challenges. The first part is that we need to actually be doing the work. We need to shift that focus to let's do the work, right? We can talk all day long about being Stoicism, but it's just empty. I'll share you a quote with Masonius Rufus. Actually, you know, that's
let's do it.
relevant to this. From he's quite the figure in Stoicism, isn't he? You know, I think most people know him for the whole beard thing.
Yeah, he's interesting.
Anyway,
But he's got some good stuff. Like there's some
just
beautiful
nuggets,
stuff that he wrote.
little
Yeah,
tight
little
little
nuggets.
in there. Yeah,
Absolutely. We've said way too
yeah.
many nuggets on this episode already, but that's true, right? Like he's one that is often overlooked. You know, with good reason, I'd say, just because there's not that much from him, and of that there's a few more of those little pieces that you'd be like, is that really Stoicism? But there's so much good stuff in there, right?
I like him because he's quirky, you know, like the whole throw out your recipe books thing, you know, like it's like, all right, if you say so. But anyway, this is the sixth lecture. How indeed could a person immediately become temperate if he only knew that one must not be overcome by pleasures, but was quite unpracticed in withstanding pleasures? How could one become just when he had learnt that one must love fairness, but had never exercised himself in avoidance of selfishness and greed? How could we acquire courage if we had merely learnt that the things which seem dreadful to the average person are not to be feared, but had no experience in showing courage in the face of such things? How could we become prudent if we had come to recognize what things are truly good and evil, but had never practiced in despising these things which only seem good? Therefore, upon the learning of the lessons appropriate to each and every excellence, practical training must follow invariably, if indeed from the lessons we have already we hope to deceive any benefit. And moreover, such practical exercise, it is the more important of the student of philosophy than of the student of medicine or any similar art, the more philosophy claims to be a greater and more difficult discipline than any other study. The reason for this is that men, or we should say humans, who enter the other professions have not had their souls corrupted beforehand and have not learned the opposite of what they are going to be taught. But the ones who start out to study philosophy have been born and reared in an environment filled with corruption and evil, and therefore turn to virtue in such a state that they need a longer and more thorough training. So yeah, and then in the fifth lecture, he's saying, do you want to? Is it more important to know about temperance, or is it more important to practice temperance? Do you want a musician who knows music theory, or who's practiced theory and knows how to do it? So this is where we are lacking as a community, like I believe, and that's not a criticism or a judgment, because we are the inheritors of a tradition that is long dead and gone, right? Like if you're a Confucian or if you're a Buddhist or whatever, you can go and find your guy, you can find your yogi teacher that'll tell you all the little ins and outs of all these things, and that will sit there and will make you do the practice. And we sort of don't really have that as a community. We've got amazing texts, amazing scholarship, and now it's up to us to actually create the picture of what does this look like in practice, so all those little things about I mean, for me, when Masonius says the beginning and foundation of temperance lay in self-control in eating and drinking, like that was kind of where I started with Stoicism, was just cleaning up my diet. And it's clean up your diet. Totally, it makes sense. But there's actually a lot to that. Like it's not just, okay, I'm going to be a virtuous Stoic, I'm going to practice moderation, I'm just going to give up my diet. There's lots and lots of ins and outs, right? So how do habits work? How does willpower work? How does goal setting work? There's all of these things that we need to figure out, because we don't have Epictetus that can tell us the little bits and pieces. And as a community, I think we need to capitalize on collective intelligence to be able to do that. Everyone has a story, right? And I think there's a lot of similarities in that story, right? There's kind of a motif, or maybe certain kind of, maybe there's about 3 or 4 different motifs of what drew people to Stoicism, how they got there, where they are in their practice, how far are you? And we need to, I think, like, this is what I want to do, is move towards, let's tap into that, right? Let's get it all out there. What was that quote that you had from, oh no, I'm thinking of another one. How Ralph Waldo Emerson says that every man is my superior in at least one way?
Yeah, brilliant.
So everyone's approached their practice in a different way, and there's many similarities in the way that people have approached their practice. So, mine started with temperance, right? That was the thing that really excited me. It was the self-mastery. I mean, I quit sugar, but like sort of just before I came to philosophy, I quit sugar, and sort of from there, that was the start of my journey. I quit meat. Next I quit dairy, then I quit meat, then I quit fast-acting carbohydrates, and then I was going to go on to canola oil, but that was like probably just a bit too nuts.
Then all you have left is celery, and you're just like, what am I doing here now?
But that's the thing. Once you get used to it, it's actually really easy. But
the point is, you're aligning your learning and your understanding with actions, right?
Yeah.
And I think that this is such an important thing. And that quote that you read from Masonius Rufus just was so beautiful. And I think there's 2 things that I get out of that. Firstly, people need to understand that, yes, there is practicality in the knowledge, but the practicality of the knowledge only comes once you've understood the principle to such a degree that it becomes your behavior, right?
Yeah.
And I really think that one of the barriers that people, so I've had kind of a turnaround on this, because I used to be all about, like, man, it's all about action, action, action. But at the end of the day, you can't act correctly unless you understand the principle to its fullest extent, right? So you need to understand that's why we talk. That's why I get guests on here. That's why we have these discussions, so that we can understand. But then you have to move it over to the action category. And I really think that the great thing about that quote that just blew me away, because I haven't read that in a long time, is this idea that studying philosophy, I've been thinking about this recently, because there's a lot of things that I know that I need to give up in my life in terms of
Mm,
things that are distractions from the real important stuff, right?
great.
And so when it comes to philosophy, this is a game that you cannot win unless you give up things that are necessary to give up. This is a game that you cannot win unless you choose the right games and the right aims. And so you really need to think of this not as just something that you're learning, not as just something that you're practicing, but something that you're embodying within yourself in the way that you live your life. Like you were saying, like a doctor is not, a
Well, not
doctor
these are
does,
Masonius's words, not mine. I mean,
yeah. Like he was saying,
yeah,
like a doctor goes to university, right? And they don't have to necessarily change a lot of their character, or,
yeah, yeah. I mean, you can
they
be a
just add
bulging,
to their
fat,
knowledge, right?
overweight doctor who smokes every day and say, "All
I've
right,
seen
here's
many of
your
them.
high cholesterol medication." It's not like
Exactly.
that with ancient philosophy. You know, the proof is
With
in the
philosophy,
pudding.
you need to change your life in order
Yeah,
to show
yeah.
that you know the theory, right? And so that's what's so important. And that's why
Unless you
I'm
want to be a
so excited.
postmodernist.
Oh gosh, let's not go down that route. But but that's why I'm so excited to get you in this group and doing challenges with people, and challenging people to not only be talking about it, not only be commenting about it, but to be using it in their life.
Mm.
And the reason why I offered this to you is because you actually reached out to me and said, hey, you're kind of doing a newsletter, do you mind if I add something to it? And you sent me this article that you wrote and a challenge alongside it, and I was like, this is way too good to just be in a newsletter. Like, this needs to be like a regular thing that he's doing with people, trying to get them to challenge themselves. And so, yeah, man, I'm excited. So we're going to be doing this weekly, right?
Man, this conversation is just like, poof, 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 poof.
It
It's
is. I'm
just,
sorry.
yeah. Like, okay, like for example, just then when you said there's lots of things that you need to give up, uh, I'm not, I'm not liking the language around that, because it's like you're focusing on negative, right? Because this is why this is why I say to people when they're talking about changing their diet, is just, it's giving up all these foods that I like, and so you're not giving up, you're actually gaining something better in its place,
That's a good point. I
right?
accept defeat on this point, because that, not
Defeat. Well,
defeat,
there you go.
I
Defeat. See?
accept learning on this point, right? Because
Yeah.
that's a brilliant point that you've made, that and that's, people too often, man, I was literally writing about this the other day, so I don't know why I speak like this, but I was writing about the idea that people focus so much on what they would have to give up in order to
Yeah.
live virtuously, as opposed to focusing on what they would gain by living virtuously, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much to gain.
I mean, when you're in that mind frame, you're still stuck at your previous stage, right? You're still caught in, I want to watch The Bachelor, but I'm not going to. Like, you're still identified. I like The Bachelor. But when you get to that point where you just go, well, The Bachelor just doesn't have a place in my life anymore. Like, it's just that let go. You're in a state of let go, and you're not forcing yourself to use willpower, because
Mm.
like willpower is a finite resource. And this is what I talk about in my effective willpower workshops, is that you can't use willpower, reliably fails and predictably fails, right? So if you're constantly battling temptation to say, I'm not going to watch The Bachelor, I'm not going to eat KFC, whatever, well, at some point you're going to give in, right? It's like 92% of people give up their New Year's resolutions by the 6th week of the year, right? Like mid
Yeah.
February. And even though, like, I mean, the Stoics would have a different point of this. I think they would say that, like, that's where the virtue is because if you're only temperate if you actually have temptation to um, to renounce or to overcome. If there is no temptation, then you're not really virtuous. But I mean, from my experience I've been at this game for about 5 years, trying to, that basic self-mastery of daily habits and willpower, and I find it's just not practical, because all those experiments and the research of Roy Baumeister about willpower, you can reliably predict that willpower is a finite resource and it will run out. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. What I was going to say, when you're talking about action, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that it's all action. In my in my workshops, what I advise people a 4-stage process, right? First, you need clarity. Then once you have clarity, you need the intention. When you've got a good intention, you need implementation, and then you need to evaluate it. So even though implementation is, the most important step, it's kind of, it's like the pillar at the top of an iceberg of all the things that kind of goes underneath. Because you need to know what you want to be implementing things that are going to work. You know what I mean? Like, but it's paradoxical because you have to go through that process of you fail and you start again, you fail, you start again, you fail, you start again, right? It's all part of the process of changing your habits, that you're not going to get it at first. It's just like in meditation. In meditation, the thoughts come and, you might lose your attention, and then you go, oh, start again. Okay. Oh, start again. Oh, start again. Oh, start again. You're constantly starting again. And then each time that gap is getting a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, without putting any judgments on it, without becoming attached to the outcome. And I think it's exactly the same thing for habits and setting goals and all your daily disciplines, your routines, whatever you want to call it. Like people say that, oh, don't ever not do it, because if you miss 2 days in a row, it's all over, and that hasn't been my experience. My experience is, well, that's just feedback, right? What you do is you go, okay, what was different about today? Do I need to change anything? Let's start again. Every time, start fresh, start fresh again. But anyway, I mean, this was sort of being my Stoicism journey. Is what I really locked into was the virtue of temperance, or in Greek, it's sophrosyne, or pronounced something like that. Anyway, that soundness of mind, self-mastery, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's kind of interesting because some people translate it as moderation, which I think moderation is a whole different can of worms to temperance. That's a whole conversation there, but just having that basic self-mastery over control, that freedom in your life to say, I can actually live the way that I want. I don't have to follow every single little impulse. And it's all paradoxical. Like, I think all this stuff is absolutely paradoxical. All like this stuff, really understanding it deeply, my experience has been, it's all paradoxical. And because, Masonius Roof saying it's the practice. It's the practice. Forget about all the talk, and Epictetus says the talk is only as useful insofar as it gives you the results. Yeah. And that's true. That is true. But then,
you need that understanding. You need to have the understanding. Otherwise, like, you can't just give something up or add something to your life and expect it to stick unless you actually understand why it would be helpful for you and how it's going to help you, and the results that you would expect to see from this, right? Like, and the stuff that we know about, like the way that dopamine triggers your brain, and the way that we know
and read into
about
that
habit
stuff,
treating.
like that stuff, you're going to need to know that stuff to practice Stoicism, right? You can learn about neuroscience and all the psychology stuff, because this is the thing, this is where I'm sort of think we need to sort of just take a little step in a slightly different direction to the Stoicism. Is let's take away kind of those moralizations or failed, that you're vicious, and say it's your brain chemistry is this thing between like our ruling faculty and our prohoresis, or whatever you want to call it, and then that doesn't always align to our brain chemistry, right? So it's kind of like we need to learn to make our the limbic system in your brain, which is, sending you all of those like craving, desire, like we need to get that on our side. We need to work with it, right? Like it's kind of taking this thing, it's bad, it's wrong, willpower, overcome it. It just doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
my experience and all the people that I talk to, all the books that I've read, it's not a helpful attitude, because then you end up just creating resistance, right? Because like this is kind of how willpower works, right? Is that it's characterized by a conflict between two parts of yourself. Every willpower it's a process where two parts of yourself want different things, and then what we need to do is activate this internal resource to tip the balance in direction of one side, right? Typically it's going to be kind of your limbic system that's like, food, look at those girls, like, or it's this tax return is literally going to kill me, your amygdala's like bah, 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 bah. And then you got your prefrontal cortex is like, nah, it's all right, buddy, let's chill out, let's apply a bit of reason here. And when you get these two parts of yourself on the same side, it just works out easier, right? This is sort of my practice on. This is where I've sort of leaned towards Aristotle a bit more. His view on virtue is that, like, we are what we repeatedly do, and like activities produce like dispositions. And then kind of similar to like in Confucianism, they have Wei Wu, that it becomes effortless action, right? But when I first got interested in, when I was really serious about, when changing habits sort of became my passion, it was sort of, I was inspired by Aristotle, his moral theory that we are what we repeatedly do, that habits are the basis of morality, right? Because, it's automatic. We just follow our automatic kind of impulses, right? So we're saying, well, when you have got good impulses, it becomes effortless, right? And that, because living when Zeno's talking about a smooth flow of life, I don't know, I've never met the guy, I've never had that conversation with him, but I imagine that that doesn't happen by constantly forcing yourself and going, willpower, I will not eat this.
Oh yeah,
I will not watch.
we know it doesn't work. Because you can see it in yourself. Like, I saw this great little bit of an interview that this comedian Bobby Lee was doing with somebody else, and his guest was extremely overweight, and his guest was saying, like, I'm gonna lose this weight, and he's like, no, Bobby Lee's like, no, you won't. And he's like, yeah, well, I've done it before, but look at you now. And he's like, no, but I'm going to do it again, but you won't. He's just like, he's just trying to point out that, listen, like, relax a little bit, understand that this whole forcing, and we've had these conversations before, this whole idea of forcing. I think that the Stoics had good things to say about there's an element of courage. We need to have that courage to sometimes force ourselves to act in a way that is in our best interests. And I think that that's important. But if you think that you're only going to, if you're going to achieve your results only by forcing, I actually think that it's far more effective to look at the science and understand how little we actually control our own minds and our own impulses.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah.
And once you realize that, right, it's freeing. And it also opens you up for forgiveness, which I think is one of the most important things that Epictetus taught. It's like self-scrutiny mixed with kindness. You need to have that kindness there that says, listen, I'm just a human being. I don't control much at all, if anything, right? Because there's a whole big debate there as well. And lately, I've been leaning far more in the direction of we really don't control anything really, apart from like very minute, like the tiniest little bit we control, maybe, right? But once you realize that, it opens you up for that forgiveness, opens you up to not force things, and it opens you up to actually listening to the way that your body is working, the way that your mind is working, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the camp of there's no such thing as free will. You know,
Mm.
it's Zeus's will, or you know, let's use. I like the word Zeus because it's kind of quirky and weird,
Just
and
because it
people,
sounds cool.
huh? Yeah. But you know, let's like nature, universe, God,
Yeah.
whatever.
The thing
That
we cannot describe, that's what it is. You
logos,
know, it's
maybe
like,
like logos is
yeah.
sort of the best word. That you know, there's this preordained order of the logos, and we are participating as part of that. And so, you know, we're just fulfilling our place that, you know, Zeus has given us a reason. There's a reason he gave us the faculty of rationality. And so it's just like, just take a step back and say, all right, I accept this is what I'm here to do. And so all of these things, it's all predetermined. You know, like, would I be doing this right now if that's a whole nother conversation. But the
Yeah, we could talk
paradox
for hours
is,
about that.
we could talk for hours about that. But the paradox is that we have to assume responsibility for free will because, you know,
Mm.
to have that conscientiousness. But the paradox of that is that, well, if you do that too much, then you know, blame yourself for things that, you know, if you didn't make good choice, if you have a moment of acrasia, a moment of weakness or whatever, you'll, you know, blame, I should be better. But there's just all these little nuances. Like there's so many little nuances that, that, you know, I haven't seen in the Stoic writings of when it actually comes time to figuring this shit out. And a lot of it's in like modern self-help stuff like that, psychology, all these sorts of stuff. We need to, you know, let's tap into all these resources. But
Mm.
anyway, I mean, because like we're talking about courage, and that's a whole nother can of worms, because like so far my Stoicism practice has just been really honing in on the habits, the practice of temperance and moderation and the little things. And so it's because I've been so focused on that, it's kind of like I'm not so good when it comes to courage, you know, like I'm just learning now for the first time, like, whoa, wow, like this is a lot of work, you know, because I think, oh, I'm pretty good at doing stoicism. Now look at me fasting. I've got I'm exercising every single day, but then you know, like I've got a fear of confrontation and, oh, you know, someone, you know, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a whole area that I've just not gone to so far. Like with willpower, there's, you know, different types of willpower. The I won't willpower, which is like resisting impulses, you know,
Mm.
and that's like what I'm really good at is that, you know, I just have this uh, unbreakable patience, and I'm really good at not giving into cravings. But um, I'm also a master procrastinator, you know, because that's I will, like it's the same kind, like you have to practice tolerating the discomfort of not of renouncing pleasures. But then there's another type of discomfort of doing the things that you don't want to do. That's just like, oh shit, I haven't really I've still got so much work to do in this area, you know, because I've been getting real great at, no biscuits for me. No, I'm not going to watch that. You know, I'm not going to indulge in this. But I mean, I've got 2 years worth of tax returns that I
Mm.
haven't done, and you know, and it's really, really intense. Like,
Should I take that part out of the episode or?
yeah. Don't ask. I mean, yeah, this is fair. Like when I do workshops, I did a workshop on procrastination, and it's just cool, you know, because everyone else is trying to, like, everyone's like, yeah, I guess I wasn't the expert on that one, you know, like, but and it's kind of it's terrifying just how much just break it down into
Mm.
small little steps, and just like uh, how much practice and training it takes to just not procrastinate, like
Mm.
that, you know, there's a whole psychology of there's so much that I've learned about myself just through trying to take on a procrastination challenge,
Mm.
right? Yeah.
And
Anyway,
this is why this is where we can do like a 360 here, because it all comes back to that idea, like nobody is perfect. And that's actually why we all need to
mm,
learn from each other.
mm,
Because if anybody's listening to this podcast thinking, oh, I'm so glad that I'm listening to Simon, he's such a great Stoic. No, I'm not. I'm terrible. Like I've got so many faults. I've got so many things that I'm working on. Like, don't take any, massive advice from me. But at the end of the day, what I am trying to do is I'm genuinely trying to figure out the answers. And those are the people who are listening to this podcast as well. They're genuinely trying to figure out the answers of what it means to be a good human being and an effective human being, right?
yeah.
And it's the
I
same
mean,
with
I'm
yourself.
I'm on the side of we don't need experts kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because what I kind of see is like I think people kind of got this attitude of like, you know, uh, at the float center that I have been interning at, this was something that I sort of came up. That's like, oh, because we'd sort of ask people come out for their float tank and say, okay, have a conversation with them about how they're going. And it's kind of like, oh, well, we're not counselors, we're not therapists, don't go there, like we're not if they need to talk about that, don't go there. And it's kind of like, I think, yeah, there's sort of this risky territory where you don't want pseudo gurus that are going to make things worse
Mm.
for you by giving you false advice. But then we don't want this. I think we're sort of slightly a little bit one step too far in the direction of oh, well, I'm not an expert. You have to talk about this with an expert. I'm not a professional. Like, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm a little bit upset today. Whoa, I'm not a counselor. Go talk to someone else about that. And so I think what's really important is just holding space for people. Like,
Mm.
we don't need to be experts on Stoicism to be able to enhance someone else's practice, right? This is what I've
Mm.
learned from doing sharing circles with my groups. So I'll read you this quote from Carl Rogers that's pretty kick-ass.
Yeah, totally.
um, if I can provide a certain type of relationship, the other person will discover within himself the capacity to use that relationship for growth and change, and personal development will occur, right? So you don't need all the answers. If someone just says, oh, let's have a talk about Stoicism, this is what my experience has been, and then you can just relate to that in some way, or you say, well, this has been my experience, and then people say, oh, actually, yeah, I never thought of it that, like,
Mm.
it's just holding the space, right? You don't need to be an expert. I mean, it's definitely good to be able to have that wealth of knowledge to bring to people. But, if you said, well, I can't host a podcast on Stoicism until I've done my PhD, then there's never going to be any podcasts on Stoicism,
Yeah.
right? Like, just start small. So anyway, so this is what the Facebook page is a really good resource for, right? To make those connections between different people, because I can tell you everything you need to know about willpower and habits, but there's many other things about. Someone is going to know. There's someone out there listening to this podcast who's going to say, I've been really working on my courage. I've been really working on overcoming my fears, and
Mm.
there's someone who will be able to tell us about all the complex nuances that they've experienced from their process of learning to face adversity in whatever unique experience they have, right? And our unique experience will be slightly different, but somehow yet still relatable in a way that we can take that, right? And in a way that maybe it's not relatable from the original sources. You know what I mean? Like getting, we don't like execution and stuff like that in, the second discourse in Epictetus, where his mate that says, oh, I'm going to take lunch now, and then execution. Oh, I'm in the habit of exercising at this hour. If later I am to die, then I will die. But now I exercise, kind of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love that sort of shit just because it's weird and quirky. But for a lot of people, it's like, but it's Stoicism in the 21st century is going to be different. There's going to be different unique little things that we all we all need to come together to get a really clear picture of what's relevant, what's not relevant. How can we,
Yeah.
so let's do it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about how people do use their courage, and like justice, another core virtue. Like what about effective altruism? They can tell us the best ways to do the most good in the world. There's people that are going to be experts in that, or like Kai, he knows all about sustainability. Well, he can
Yeah.
be our resident Stoic expert on sustainability. I'll be the resident Stoic expert on habits and willpower. Someone else on courage, and someone else on, I don't know, whatever, like whatever else you need to know. We all can put to. There's a big puzzle of what it means to embody Stoicism in the 21st century, and we all have our own little piece. And
Yeah,
once
that's
we all
it.
put our own little pieces down, like no one is going to have the whole clear thing, right? It's the paradox of the sage, that there is no sage, and all that sort of stuff. But we all have little nuggets of wisdom each, and if we can all put them together as a group, as a community, as a collective, like let's make the shit happen. So
Yeah,
like get on
absolutely.
Zoom, join your chats, talk to people, share your experiences, find a local group or create your own, and leave posts. And because the page, I really like the Facebook page. Maybe it's because there's only 3,000 members, but as opposed to in the other pages where there's tens of thousands of people. But I haven't seen dumb people yet. I shouldn't. Well, okay, that's a very strong value judgment, right? So correct.
No, but
Correct me if
people
I
understand
have
what
that.
you mean, right? Because you can
Yeah,
go down some massive rabbit holes in conversations within Stoicism. But I think, honestly, I think what I've tried to encourage with this podcast from the very start
yeah,
is that, firstly, everybody has a valuable opinion if we're willing to actually have the conversation, right?
yeah,
And secondly, like, honestly, we don't necessarily know absolutely everything we need to know about this philosophy. There's more
yeah,
to learn, and there's so many different, like you said, there's so many different perspectives. Like, there's as many ways to conceptualize what Stoicism is as there are people to conceptualize it, right?
yeah.
Like,
Totally.
and so I just always
That's what
encourage
drew me to
people, like,
Stoicism.
yeah, just get into the group and talk, and don't argue, don't troll people. That's not what it's all about. And if you think that that's what it's all about, then you
But
don't
it
get
just
it.
doesn't
It's
happen.
clear.
Like
Yeah.
I think it doesn't happen because it's the practical Stoic mastermind. So straight away it's like, this is a practical group. We're here to practice. It so there isn't time. If you right, let's put out an episode of the Practical Stoic podcast where we're going to be like, is Boris Johnson Stoic, or are vaccines Stoic,
Yeah,
or
let's never do that. I'm sorry.
but you'll see those type of people will become attracted to the group, right?
Yeah.
But
Or maybe
because
they
we are a
won't, because
community.
I'm inclined to, with those sorts of discussions, honestly, I always fall in the middle. I'm always inclined to just be like, well, you've got some good points over there. You've got some good points too. How about we shake hands and everybody be nice and understand? There's, but even that kind of moderation, even that kind of middle ground can go too far sometimes. And I've
Yeah,
recognized that as well. It's like sometimes you need to pick a side, right? But now we're really getting into the weeds. But I think in
yeah,
general, what we're trying to say here is people jump on the Practical Stoic Mastermind.
yeah.
Ashley's going to be doing challenges here. Ashley, you're an absolute champion, and you inspire me with how much you're really trying to understand this
Yeah.
philosophy. And I feel it'd be a
Yeah, so
good thing.
with the challenges, what I'm like, I want to focus on the nitty gritty and the ins and outs, right?
Mm,
So it's the little things of your intention implementations, right? It's how are we going to make this habit stick? How are we going to get started? How are we going to find motivation for you to do this? We can use each other for accountability. this is what I know, like, this is what I've been practicing and learning about. And this is like, that's the support that I'm going to be there to provide you with, is just those little bits, like, okay, this time and place, what works best for you? Okay, this works better. Okay, let's bring all that wisdom together. Like there was the Zoom chat about gratitude last weekend, and that was really cool. Everyone shared their own little piece about gratitude, and now, so let's do it. Let's follow up with, okay, well, how's everyone going with gratitude? That's a great place to start. Like, how's your journaling practice going? What's working for you? What's not? So this is what I want to focus. And there's so many different areas, like, the metaphor of Stoicism is a cobweb, where there's no real place to start. It's all interconnected. So we can really start anywhere. And, we could start with gratitude, since that's where the Zoom chat was at last week. And there was a great discussion about that. I mean, I'm with Masonius on this one, where I think that food and drink is the foundation of temperance. That's where I would start. I mean, that's where I started, is cleaning up your diet. But it's up to you. Like, what inspires you? What makes you really feel connected to Stoicism? Maybe it is being more courage. Maybe it is doing your civic duty or whatever. Like, let's use some person-centered kind of things. And let's just do it. Let's just kick ass. Let's get on the Zoom chats. Let's make it happen. Let's live according to nature.
Yeah, man.
So yeah,
I love it. Hey, I'm on the topic. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for everything you're doing, and I'm really excited to see how you how you take this and the directions that you go. I think it's going to be only good for everybody. So thank you for absolutely crushing it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no worries. Oh, well, I'll see you on the Facebook page, everyone. And get to a Zoom chat if you can. And if you can't get to any of Simon's Zoom chats, I mean, there'll be people all over the world. I'm doing them with my group. It's Perth Practicing Stoics. So the first one's this weekend. We're going to do the view from above. But there'll be, there's Stoic groups all around the world. So yeah, make it happen.
Absolutely. I love it, Ash. Thanks so much.
Sweet. Awesome.
So there you go, my interview with Ashley McCole. Now, make sure you head to the show notes, go to the link, and join the Practical Stoic Mastermind on Facebook. We'd love to see you there. And when you're there, we'd love to see you participating in the challenges that Ashley's going to be running in there as well. Also, if you're local to Perth, we've got a couple of links for Ashley's meetup groups that he runs over in Perth as well. We'd love to see you join those and participate if you can. So apart from that, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you next time. But until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. If you'd like to stay up to date with the Practical Stoic community and everything to do with this podcast, then just go to my website, simonjedrew.com, and subscribe to the Practical Stoic Weekly, a newsletter that I send out every week with updates and all sorts of great Stoic insights. You can also find me everywhere online by searching Simon J. E. Drew. See you next time.